Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about micro frontends and testing and stuff. So let's get into it. So the question in question was a bit of a story here as well, and the person asked, Frederick, we're going to implement micro front ends in our company. I feel that it's a bit of a risky move, and do you see any problems with this apart from the benefits that it can bring, such as helping the QA team with testing? So the short answer is yes, I see a lot of problems with what you're about to do, and my guess is that this is going to be one of those subtle technical depths that get implemented. Everybody's really excited about it for a few months, and then you don't actually, because you never measure, you most likely don't measure how fast you can go to market, and you're going to realize that this actually blew up in your face. It's like a silent fart. Like you don't notice. It's not like a big bang problem. It's something that just kind of sneaks up on you. That's what's most likely going to happen. So let me explain. So I actually wrote back to this subscriber and I asked the question, what do you mean about this benefiting the QA team? How would, from your perspective, how does a micro frontend solution help your QAs? And I kind of thought I knew what he was going to answer, and he answered the exact thing I thought he was going to answer. And the answer was very simple. Well, if I can ship one page or a section of my application, then that narrows the scope of the testing for the QA. And I wrote back and I said, that is an absolutely false assumption. It's completely false. The reason is very simple, because when you're testing a flow of whatever you're testing, there's usually two situations when you do any form of testing. You have to do risk-based testing when you do any type of QA work, because exhaustive testing is impossible. So what you're going to have to do is that you're going to have to ask the fundamental question to all your developers and say, is this problem, like this changes that you made, are they scoped to this page or this thing here? And then you're going to say yes, or you're going to say no. If you say yes, then it's only scoped to that page, and the QA knows that they can just test that part, like that page. That is possible regardless of if you're using micro frontends or not. Because if you are so certain and so confident when you're making a change that this code that you're touching, it's really only scoped to this part of the application, then there's no need for a full regression test or a test that goes beyond the scope of this page. But most of the time you're probably making a change not to just one page, depending of course how you split your it comes down to how you split your micro frontends, like how the split actually looks. But odds are that you're not doing that, because remember, the server is still the same. The server is still the same thing. So in theory, you're always going to be in a situation where there's a risk that you broke something, because if you are, let's say for the sake of argument, just working on one page and you have your micro frontend development doing all those great things, well, the server is still the same, as I said. And all that has to happen is that you made some change with the UI that either sends more data or does like some weird thing with the database. It persists something in an incorrect fashion, or creates some state, or misses to hit some mark or do something that cascades into a bug on another page. So you're just giving yourself a false sensation of security. Like, just having micro frontends does not narrow your scope of testing as a QA, not at all. It's a completely false argument. But the other perspective, which is probably one of the benefits that this person does not consider, is that you have, well, this is one of the things that people get excited about when it comes to micro frontends, because, oh yeah, we will split out the responsibility areas just as we do with microservices or SOA, or like service-oriented architecture, things of this nature, and then we will give all of those responsibilities to one team. That can absolutely work. It can absolutely work. The problem I see with that, which is what this person was asking about, is twofold. The first problem is going to be that if you do the splitting correctly, you will have a inter-team dependency problem. What do I mean by that? Well, it's very simple. The same problem that you have in back-end work is going to come to front-end. And the biggest problem in back-end work in a big distributed system is that you have different services and different teams that they depend on each other. So if you want to do something on one service, well, then you need 3 other teams to kind of be in line, and they need to schedule a bunch of work and have a bunch of meetings to talk about if they can do this, when can they do it, is it on a Friday? Well, no, then we can't do it. If it's on a Thursday, then maybe we can do it. All of this extra work that kind of comes with scheduling people because they have some part of the code or some part of the system that you depend on, and now you don't own your entire work process. That's the beautiful part about having a monolithic application, in a sense, because then you always have access to all of it. You're all kind of responsible for it, and that's something that that's a benefit actually when it comes to front-end development, that you can always go in and do the change yourself, assuming of course you have some type of ownership. But if you do a micro front-end split, you could potentially get into that exact same problem. So you have to make you have to really know the split. Like the split has to be really good so that you own like a flow of some sort or something like that's fairly isolated, so that you can actually work completely independently, because that's the whole point of it, right? If you make a really shitty split, then all of a sudden every time you might actually find that all of a sudden whenever you want to ship something, you need to synchronize with another team because you own 1 page or 2 pages in the middle of their flows, and you're always depending on their code or something of that nature. So that's a very big risk that can happen, and it's very likely to happen, I'm sorry to say, because odds are that you will underestimate quite drastically how difficult splitting something well. It's actually very hard. Second thing that can happen, which is also most likely going to happen, it's also a risk, is that you are going to decouple the dependencies, and you're going to decouple the ownership of all of this code. You see, splitting something out into micro frontends doesn't mean shit for the user. It doesn't mean anything for the user at all. From the perspective of the user, the best thing that you can possibly ship to them is a monolithic application where you do code splitting, you use lazy loading and these sorts of practices in order to reduce the load time as much as humanly possible. But the amount of code that you send should ideally be the lowest amount possible. That is all but impossible for you to guarantee when you have micro frontends, unless you have someone who is in charge of making sure that all the teams are using the same dependencies. Because if team A is using one version of, say, jQuery, and another one is using another version, like, it's very hard for you to make sure that everybody's using the same code. And honestly, if you get to a point, if you were in a situation where you could guarantee that everybody's using the same shared libraries and the same shared dependencies, then what's the point of micro frontends in the first place? It becomes almost a little bit pointless to try and use it if you already have such a well-structured work process and so well-structured dependencies that everybody's just kind of in line with each other. They're all kind of in sync with the other teams. Then there's really little point in doing something like this. So what I want you to take away from this is that I absolutely agree with your bad feeling, or like the subscriber's bad feeling regarding adding micro frontends without like a really structured plan. I mean, I haven't been in the meetings that this person has been in. Maybe there's a really, really good reason to do this, but the 2 main real risks that I see with this is, number one, that the split is really bad, and all of a sudden all work that could be done by a single team now needs 2 teams or 3 teams to just deliver, because the ownership has changed in some weird way and you need to touch each other's projects and stuff of this nature. The second thing that can happen, I can almost guarantee it's going to happen, is that each team is going to start managing their own dependencies, and they're going to be even more out of sync with each other, which means that you're going to most likely have duplicated dependencies, you're going to have a heavier page. Like, all of these things is like, it's not a deal breaker, it's a worse worse experience than it could have been. And a few of the benefits that this person was mentioning, such as the QA team would be able to feel more confident in their testing, is actually completely false. There's nothing that at all indicates that having micro frontends is going to reduce the amount of testing you have to do, because as I said, there's only two situations that can occur. One is the touched code is scoped to a very narrow scope. Doesn't matter if it's a micro frontend or not. If you already know that this is scoped to this section of the code, it doesn't really matter how you deploy. You know that this is the area that you should be testing. Most of the time you're touching more than one section of the code, which means that in theory you can always get into a situation where your part of the code could have created a situation where there's something outside of that context that actually broke, because you're still using the same backend service or the same backend system. So there is a benefit to micro frontends, but it feels to me as if this company has been going into it for all the wrong reasons without thinking about all the risk it actually poses to their overall work process. Have a great day.